Everyone, I have 11:15 and I know that we're standing between you all and lunch, so we'll go ahead and get started. We may have some people that join us, and if people need to leave, we understand that as well. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So, I'd like to welcome everybody. This is my second time at OLC Accelerate, and I've been to several other OLC conferences. So, in this session, you're going to be able to discover online course assessment examples demonstrating the path from learning outcomes to successful, well-matched assessments that meet course goals and ultimately institutional accreditation requirements, because we all know if our institutions aren't accredited, then we're in big trouble. So, first, I'll just take a minute to introduce myself. I am David C. Dixon. I'm from Southeast Kentucky Community and Technical College. Southeast is part of the 16 community and technical college system in the state of Kentucky, and we're located on the Virginia-Tennessee border to kind of give you an idea of where Southeast Kentucky Community and Technical College is. We serve 4 counties in Southeast Kentucky, and I serve as the EPIC project team leader, which is enhancing programs for IT certification, as well as I serve as a course developer, course facilitator, and quality assurance reviewer.
I'm going to see if I can use the microphone so we don't switch too much. We'll see. Hi, I'm Allison White. I'm from Ohio University. I work primarily on our branch campus in Chillicothe, but I'm an associate professor and a program coordinator for an associate degree in applied business called Office Administration. And I organize that program on all 5 of our regional campuses. So I'll be sharing some insights from that program as part of our examples today.
So obviously you all can tell that I'm a millennial, so I use Twitter an awful lot, and I'm trying to win that social media ninja award. So I would like for you all to kind of join in on our discussion. If you have some thoughts you want to tweet out, or if you have questions, I'm going to try to remember to check the Twitter feed every once in a while to see if you have any questions, but we'll have time for questions also at the end. But our hashtag is #OutcomeAssessments.
Okay, here are our goals, and you may have seen these in the longer version of our program, and our presentation is online as well. But just to recap, we're going to use some research-based methodologies. We're going to show you how we're using them for our learning outcomes and assessment processes. And we're going to show you how we align our outcomes and assessments, which is very important for accreditation, how useful these methods can be in online environments, and we're going to show you how these help students to be more successful. While you're achieving your goals, the end goal is to help them achieve their goals. And again, we're going to emphasize how these help with the accreditation process. How many of you are involved in the accreditation process at your universities? Or at least being held accountable for it in some way, shape, or form, right? Okay. So here are the research sources that we're using. We're using New Blooms for the verbs and the pathways for our outcomes, the lower order thinking skills up to the higher order thinking skills. Even at the associate degree level, we hope to prepare our students for bachelor's degrees, so we're going to go up to the HOTS too. We're using Kirkpatrick's model, and that's typically for training or train the trainer or business model, but we're teaching in the business program, so I'm going to show you how I use that in the associate degree in my program. And we're also using the Association for American College and Universities, HIPS. Anybody familiar with HIPS? High order? Yes, high impact educational practices. Of course, if we're in a technology program, we definitely know a lot about HIPS, but I'm going to show you how we're using them.
Okay, so just moving right along, I'm going to talk to you a little bit before we get into assessments about the KCTCS Online Learn on Demand format that we use. And so everything knows these days that everything is on demand, so why not get your education on demand, right? With our state-of-the-art online education program, students are able to take courses at their own pace between 6 to 15 weeks. Some students finish faster, some students take the full 15 weeks, or in the summer terms, 6 to 10 weeks. So the flexible nature of the multiple start dates lets students quickly acquire the skills they need to earn a promotion or professional certification, or even leading up to a fully associate degree through our fully accredited programs. So with Learn on Demand, they'll never have to rehash material that they know. So that's what I'm going to talk about in assessments. So our classes are set up with the modular approach. We take the full parent course and break that down into modularized courses or bite-sized chunks of the courses. Modules earn credit, credits lead to certificates, diplomas, or degrees. So now into assessments. Our modules and our parent courses all have what we call credit for prior knowledge exams. Students who can demonstrate that they are already proficient in the course module or the parent course competencies will receive credit for the module or course without having to complete all of the course requirements. Once enrolled in the module, all students are required to take the course pretest or the module pretest. Those that demonstrate mastery of the pretest may move on to what we call the credit for prior learning exam. So if they make a 90% or above on the pretest, then we use the adaptive release feature that opens up the credit for prior knowledge exam. If they make a 90% or above on the credit for prior knowledge exam, which may include special projects and or assignments from the course modules, mastery of the CPL will equate to modular credit or course credit, and the students will be able to move on to another course and receive grades. So this just kind of shows you how the modules are set up. As you can see, as soon as a student enters a module, they're going to take the module pretest. Then if they make a 90% or above, it's going to adaptive release into the credit for prior knowledge exam. So if they pass that credit for prior knowledge exam, they'll either move on to the next module, or if that is we'll just look at the parent course in just a moment. And you can see if they make a 90% or 89% or below, they're just going to work through the content, which will teach them the competencies and the student learning outcomes. So the full flow of the full course is very similar, except they take the course pretest, and if they make a 90% or above, it opens the credit for prior knowledge, credit for prior learning exam, and then they can move through. So if they make an 89% or below on that credit for prior knowledge exam, they're going to have to move on to module 1, but they may know the competencies in some of the modules and not the other modules, so they're able to quickly pass through materials that they know and show mastery. So this is very student-centric. Busy working adults need the flexibility that only KCTCS Online can offer, and self-paced learning is another unique benefit of KCTCS Online. With KCTCS Online, students not only choose from our multiple 10 start dates, they can complete courses on their own schedule by the end of the term. So most students will take a combination of our traditional learn by term classes, which start at the beginning and then end at the end of the semester, but have due dates built in and don't have the assessment options. Or some students do everything completely Learn on Demand, but with Learn on Demand, it is very student-centric. So you may ask, how does this have to do with aligning to assessments and so forth? So our courses are built with competency-based education. There are many definitions for competency-based education, but some of the essential components are competencies are explicit and measurable, students advance upon mastery, and it enables personalized learning approaches. So authentic assessments, we know, are a very integral part to competency-based education. So within these classes, all of our assessments are authentic assessments. Authentic assessments are a form of assessment in which students are asked to perform real-world tasks that demonstrate meaningful application of essential knowledge and skills. An authentic assessment usually includes a task for students to perform and a rubric by which their performance on the task will be evaluated. So you can kind of see the 4 steps that our facilitators, course developers, subject matter experts go through in order to create authentic assessments. First, they identify what they want their students to know. So often that is already set by our curriculum committees for each course, so that task is pretty simple. Then they're going to identify the criteria. So for example, you'll see in a little while there's objective-based tests, different other types of projects and things. Then select the task, For example, in one of the computer classes that I teach, in order to show mastery that you know how to make an Excel spreadsheet, you're going to create the Excel spreadsheet. You're not going to just answer multiple choice questions about the Excel spreadsheet. And then there's a rubric to measure the performance on the task. So as we're developing these courses, we use a very extensive Excel document that we call a course planner. This is just one screen in the course planner. But we take the competencies, which are very broad, and break that down into more student learning outcomes. And then we identify the activities and the assessments that we want the students to look for. So here's just a sample student learning outcome from an office technology course. The competency is import word processing and graphic files from other software application programs in producing camera-ready publications. So this is where revised Bloom's comes in. Understand and apply knowledge of how to import files from other applications into the desktop publishing application. So in order to do this, we use an objective-based test that's going to cover the knowledge. That objective-based test may be multiple choice, fill in the blank. It may be short essay, or it could be the students actually using a simulated software and showing that they can do that task, and the software would record their progress. This is one of our healthcare management classes. A competency is plan and implement an instructional needs assessment given a specific population of users in a healthcare setting. So our revised Bloom's is analyze. So we're going to be able to analyze learner, task, and situational characteristics relating back to an instructional needs assessment. So you may have an objective-based quiz as well as a needs analysis assignment to be able to analyze the data that's collected. So now we'll see if we have any Twitter, if I can get my iPad to come on.
While you're bringing that up, is anybody else using a learn-on-demand method at their university or college? I know for OU, we allow students to test out of a course or maybe take an accelerated version because they've had some prior knowledge, but this learn-on-demand, I'm always jealous of when he and I research or present together. Anybody else? No? See?
Anyone else using credit for prior knowledge or credit for prior learning exams?
Yeah, there's a couple hands over here.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to move
You
forward.
ready? Okay. I'm going to stick by my notes over here so you can be the tech guy. So for the New World Kirkpatrick's, I don't know how many of you might have heard of Kirkpatrick's model. It's actually more of a business model or a train-the-trainer model. And because we're teaching in business programs, I gravitated towards this. It was first created in 1950, and then it was updated in 2014. And if you want to do the next one. So here is an example of how I'm using it. First, I'm going to show you my office administration learning outcomes. And this is kind of detailed because I wanted you to see how they're written. These aren't all of them, but it's pretty extensive to what I want graduates of the program to learn. So identify indirect and direct communications. So communications is a goal. Technology and software application skills is another one. And we want them to be able to think analytically, problem solve, and the quantitative skills like accounting and mathematics. Administrative skills, that's at the core of the program, so they learn procedures, methodologies, they can plan and create and draw conclusions. And define ethics in the workplace and apply it. Of course, ethical considerations are in many programs. And then finally, the leadership role. That's kind of what separates them from perhaps having business classes in high school or vocational school. Here's where these students succeed and usually end up excelling in internships because they've had these managerial, organizational, leadership skills. And then here's Kirkpatrick's levels. So there are 4 levels. The reaction level 1 measures how students react to the coursework, and I use group projects, discussions. We do field trips, community involvement like volunteering and practicums, and we have an entry and exit seminar, and that's where students get a chance to do that. But we try to include alumni and our advisory board in so many aspects of the program because many of them are graduates of the program. We want them to help our future students. So that helps me at the reaction level to measure. At level 2 for Kirkpatrick's is learning. So what degree are they acquiring that knowledge, that skill, that commitment and participation, and that's measured by portfolios. My students will tell you they hate portfolios by about midway. But then their capstone project is an electronic portfolio, and they're very proud of it when they finish. But it requires writing. It's not just me telling them do this and they do that. They have to think, they have to apply, and they have to explain why they did something and show an artifact for it. Are you familiar with WAC and WIC, writing across the curriculum, writing intensive courses? So that's where this comes in as well. Behavior, level 3, to what degree the students apply learning on the job. So we do internships, even at the associate degree level. Alumni often host our interns and evaluate them. And then we do surveys. Of course, the university does a survey once students graduate, but I also conduct a survey in the entry and the exit seminar so that students get to tell me right before they leave, you know, I would like to recap on Excel, or I would like to recap on ergonomics or process or technical writing. And we will adapt that course to make sure that they get that chance to master that skill before leaving. So surveys tell me that. And then finally, level 4 is results, to what degree the outcomes occur as a result of program and subsequent reinforcement. So this is where outside agencies and organizations get that chance to evaluate the student. So the Microsoft Office certifications, we use those. The internship site supervisor evaluates the student too, and I do not tell them how to evaluate the student. I give them the opportunity to either find a checklist that they like, or they can say satisfactory, unsatisfactory. They can give levels, or preferably they write them a letter of recommendation, and that's usually the case. But this gives the internship site supervisor some flexibility, and I really like that, and so do the students. And then the civil service exams, I don't know if everyone is familiar with the fact that depending on the job that you are applying for, the civil service exam fluctuates. And there's actually one for government offices that will use many of the skills, geographic, numeric, and alphabetical filing, that kind of thing, for a government office job. So our students can be evaluated in that knowledge on a civil service exam.
So before we move on to the next session, any questions? Anybody have anything they'd like to add?
I have a question for you from way back in your initial slides. Are all those asynchronous models without an instructor involvement? Is that how you can have some of the cohort run at one speed and the rest can move?
So with the Learn on Demand format, it is all asynchronous. So students may have other students in the course with them, but there is not a lot of interaction. Now there is facilitator interaction. For example, if a student has a question or an issue, they're able to contact the course facilitator, who may set up a tutoring appointment. Or for example, if the student goes all the way through like a chapter and then doesn't make a 70% or above, which is how a student would move on to the next chapter, then there's remediation that will occur. And then we also utilize Starfish Retention Solutions. So the instructors will raise flags. So if there's a low test grade, then it's going to reach out to that student success network, because we have success coaches as well as on-site advisors. So all of these online students that are in these modules still have access to tutoring labs and so forth. And we also use BrainFuse, which is online tutoring as well. So we would like to do more synchronous type activities with these classes, but it's almost impossible, because like the sections of classes I teach, sometimes I have 1 student, sometimes I have 10 students. It just really depends. Any other questions?
Anybody else using Starfish? David introduced me to that maybe a couple of years ago, and I think we might be the last to know, but we just adopted it late last spring, and we love it. Yes. The students are using it too, so it's communication in both ways. It's great for advising.
And one thing I will go back and say, I know most learning management systems, Allison and I both use Blackboard. Blackboard Learn. We're getting ready to migrate to the SaaS environment with KCTCS. The adaptive release feature is really good because you can set rules. So if you have students that are moving at a faster pace, mastering those competencies or those student learning outcomes at a faster pace than other students, you can adapt the tests that they're getting, the assignments that they're getting, and so forth.
Okay, this wild slide here is an example of some high-impact educational practices that we're using. So on the left side is a picture of one of my students' capstone projects just at the cover, and it's a fully hyperlinked presentation that they are always proud of. And then there's an example of a blog and also how the websites are set up. And do you want to explain the ones you have on there?
So I'm attempting to see these because I should have worn my glasses, but the first one that you see is just kind of a snapshot. If you pull this up in the app, you can obviously zoom in and make it larger. You can see where they can take the course pretest and how there's nothing else really showing there. Then you see an example of declare a reference variable of a type file name. So you can see where they've got some short answer, and then there you just kind of see how the chapter assignments will flow.
We'd be happy to show you some examples of these. We linked to these in a separate presentation previously, and it was a little slow going, so we attempted snapshots this time.
So now you're taking a look at MIT 295, which is our Medical Information Technology capstone course. We use the capstone word, but this is more or less a virtual internship or an in-person internship. So with higher impact strategies, 2 of those strategies are capstone courses and projects or internships. Whether you call those senior capstones or some other name, these accumulating experiences require students nearing the end of their college years to create a project or some sort that integrates and applies what they learned. For example, Allison's portfolios that she uses in her project. The project might be a research paper, a performance, a portfolio of best work, or an exhibit of artwork. Capstones are offered both in departmental programs and increasingly in general education as well. So we have a lot of certificate programs as well within KCTCS, so we're trying to integrate some capstones into those certificates, as well as all of our associative applied science programs either have a capstone course or an employability type course. Internships are another increasingly common form of experiential learning. The ideal is to provide students with direct experience in a work setting, usually related to their career interests, and to give them the benefit of supervision and coaching from professionals in the field. If the internship is taken for course credit, students usually complete a project or paper that is approved by the faculty member. So you may ask, how does this relate back to student learning outcomes and assessments? Well, you see the course competencies and the student learning outcomes for this class. A lot of the very first one, integrate learned coursework into work experiences. How else would a student be able to integrate what they learned in a coursework without going out into the field or doing things virtually? So these are the course requirements for 295, the virtual practicum requirements, simulated administrative medical office practicum skills for medical assistance textbook. So we use an Elsevier product to do this. You can kind of see how it's broken down into simulated assignments and so forth. Or they do have the option, even though these classes are delivered completely online, the student does have the option to set up with a practicum site. And we have several students that do that because they want the real world work experience. So the student is responsible for finding their own site, because in this class there may be students from all 16 colleges in the system. It may not just be from the delivering college. So this is just a slide of some of the assessments. The 295 class also prepares the students to take the NOCTI exam. How many of you all are familiar with the NOCTI exams? Okay, we have one person.
Yeah.
So this covers several learning competencies aligned to the higher order thinking in education, being an example of high impact educational practices. The example covers a wide variety of questions and topics to ensure that students are capable and prepared for the jobs that the Medical Information Technology program has prepared them for. So there you see some of their writing assignments as well as some of the multiple choice type assignments that link back to learning competencies.
So I apologize, this one's a little hard to read, but if you're familiar with HIPS, hopefully you can stick with me. Learning communities is probably the only HIPS opportunity that I'm not using in my degree program, but others at my university are. Any of you using learning communities on your campuses? Yeah. They're very popular, and it does help students to get to know one another, to work together, and work together between classes. But the ones that we are using, that definitely this helps you make measurable outcomes, are projects and practicums and internships and intellectual experiences. So we have kind of a theme across the OAT degree program for technology and society, and so we apply everything that we're doing when we're using Office Suite applications, or we incorporate other applications as well to help them draw ergonomic designs and CADs. Then that technology and society, we're always applying it to real world, similar to what David was explaining earlier. First year seminars and capstone projects. Again, writing across the curriculum and writing intensive courses. And diversity and global learning. We like to demonstrate diversity in our faculty and within our students, but also give them access to clubs, activities on campus. So I think that you can see whether you're teaching a traditional class or whether you're teaching online, and we do both. The OTEC program, OAT program is available fully online, blended, or completely face-to-face. So we offer that flexibility to our students. But it helps you meet those requirements for accrediting bodies. They truly love to see that. So this slide is another attempt for me to show you a portfolio without linking over to Blackboard. We're using Blackboard, both of us. Anybody using Canvas? That's very popular. Anything else? Shout out. What was it? Oh, okay. Anybody else? So Blackboard's pretty popular. They dominate. They bought up a lot of people a while back, right? But here you can see on the bottom left is an example of how Blackboard allows you to use its journal feature to do an electronic portfolio. And within that portfolio, students write what they have created, and then they link that document right there in the portfolio. And this can be downloaded, and they can take it with them. And then on the right is Campus Pack Journal. I believe that's a McGraw-Hill product. It was expensive for us to keep, so we let that go, or else maybe Blackboard just made theirs less expensive. But I really like the creativity that Campus Pack Journal gave us to create portfolios with. And on this slide, you can see an example of a blog, and I'd like to show the differences between just a discussion and using true sources in a blog. And then we use wikis as well, and this particular wiki is where students are learning about bachelor degree options that they can take. Again, here's a larger picture of a capstone project on the left. And on the right, you can see some examples of technical writing that we do. So we describe processes, we go out into businesses, and we do ergonomic assessments and process improvements. And you can see a swim lane process at the top, and you can see an ergonomic office design at the bottom right.
So as we promised, student learning outcomes and how they relate back to the accrediting bodies. At Southeast Kentucky Community and Technical College, we are accredited by CACSCOC, better known as SACS. Do we have any more SACS members in here? Yep. We have one back in the back.
Whoop, whoop.
Okay, so how do student learning outcomes fit back into SACS, and why should you be measuring these at your institution? We just went through our SACS reaffirmation for our 10-year last year, and one of the things they dinged us on was student learning outcomes. So one of the ways that we have, and this is one of the ways that we are tracking those better, is within Blackboard you can attach standards to test questions, to assignments, and then you can measure, are the students getting all of these outcomes and so forth. So that's the type of evidence they're looking for. But that links back straight back to institutional effectiveness 3.3 1.1 education programs to include student learning outcomes. This is evidenced by each assignment relating to the student learning outcomes set forth in the course. This is also evidenced in 3.5 education programs, undergraduate programs. 3.5.1, the institution identifies college level general education competencies. All of our classes have those gen ed competencies attached to them, and the extent to which graduates have attained them. In addition to course specific learning outcomes, each course also has general education competencies which are embedded in the course. So again, if you're using, I would assume that most learning management systems, and those of you who are on Canvas, you all have a way that you can attach the learning outcomes to your assessments. So those make real nice, pretty reports and real pretty, colorful grade books as well if you attach all of that. I'm envious because I've not got that technical in my courses yet. Most of my assessments are only linked to like 1 or 2 outcomes, so I've not got there yet. But that's in a nutshell, student learning outcomes and accrediting bodies for us at Southeast.
Before I explain what we're using at OU, is anybody familiar with the performance-based funding, state subsidy models? Anybody feeling that? So, yes. So when David said we were deemed for learning outcomes, I think that's coming across the board. We're actually going to make ours public. They wanted to do that in spring, and we asked for another year to get that clean before it's publicized. But that's coming from, we're accredited by the Higher Learning Commission. Of course, the state mandates are forcing this on us, but Higher Learning Commission, it was formerly the North Central Association of Colleges and Schools. Anybody in the HLC in here? Yes. Yes. And we use the AQUIP pathway. Anybody familiar with AQUIP? So it's kind of like I call it a jury of your peers, but a group comes to you, they evaluate you, and for us too, it was about learning outcomes. So we're making those maps visible, cleaning them up, and making outcomes that are measurable, and making assessments go with them. And we've always had that, and some of the programs like nursing is accredited by their own accrediting body. Business programs that are accredited on their own are really clean, and the rest of us need to clean up our act.
So I'm not seeing any questions coming in on Twitter, but do we have any comments, questions? Anybody want to any clarification or would like to talk about some things at their institution?
You want to share? Hang on, I'll come down to you. If you don't mind, I'm going to continue to hold this microphone because I have a cold and I'm not going to share it with you. I'm going to wipe this off when I finish.
So how do you determine which students go into this competency-based pathway? How does that happen?
So pretty much, we have, like I said, we have our Learn by Term model, which is your traditional online classes, then we have our Learn on Demand. So it really it's more student preference. A lot of times a student may start in a Learn on Demand class and they see that it's not for them and they will not take any more Learn on Demand classes, or we can go back and look at a student's record. So if we have a student that has previous coursework and they have a GPA of like 1.0, we're going to deter them away. We don't have a set format. We have an online assessment that students can take, but it is not mandatory. And a lot of times what happens, especially in the state of Kentucky, we've been really impacted by the layoffs from the coal industry and different things of that nature. So we'll have students that are laid off in the middle of the semester, but they want to come back to school. So the multiple start dates really help with that. And most of the time, those students will put them in a very entry-level class like Introduction to Computers or Digital Literacy, which is required. And they can complete that class easily in 6 weeks. And then the next semester, they'll move over to either NC or Learn by Term.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming.
So,
if you have questions, be sure to stop and see us afterwards, and we can show you our courses and pictures.
So up here we have our email addresses and then our program Twitters. Of course, if you're on Twitter, you're going to find my personal Twitter. Feel free to follow me and see my randomness. Of course, well, we would like to thank you for attending, and remember to evaluate us in your app. I've been forgetting to do this myself because I like to go to the little sessions at the little tables. But if anybody would have any more, has any questions or would like to see some of this stuff in action, feel free to send us emails. I would love to set up Skype sessions because it makes the learn on demand format probably makes more sense if you're seeing it versus me up here telling you about it. But these different practices, you're usually using them and you don't realize them, but I hope that you've picked up maybe some things you can incorporate into your programs, or if you would like more information on how we use specific things. And we've got you all out about 10 minutes early, so.
Early for lunch.
Thank you all for coming.
Hopefully we'll see you at the Merry Christmas party, and it's a little early.
I'm going to see Mickey Mouse.
Yes. Hi.
I'm sorry, what is a needs analysis? I Googled it and I couldn't really find the educational context.
Okay, a needs analysis, we have what's called a healthcare specialist program, which is a lot of times your clinic managers, we have a lot of service doctors and nurse practitioners that have their own clinics. So in these courses, we're teaching people to lead those clinics. So a needs analysis may be where you would go in, have a simulated doctor's office, and go in and tell us what that doctor's office is lacking.
That's what the
And I think it's
broader
kind of a
business
generic.
application means. So
Yes.
basically, you're trying to understand what the site of the practicum needs in terms of
Yes.
the learning activity of the
And then,
student.
You can apply needs analysis in a lot of different
or a student may be given a sample needs analysis and have to analyze that. Tell us, based on that needs analysis, what does that clinic need? Or we also have a needs analysis assignments in our CIT programs. What's lacking to make this a faster internet connection or things like that. So we do a lot of real world stuff because we're a community and technical college. So.
And when you were saying earlier about not being technically savvy about linking learning outcomes with different assignments and assessments, is that just a matter of, I think it's just a matter of just telling Blackboard that
Yes.
Yes.
and
Yes.
so then it will graph it for you?
Yes, it will give you a report. And your
We need to
grade
get
book.
that done.
I've been linking it, but for some reason I didn't know that it would graph it for me.
Yeah, it will spit out a report. Like I said, I'm not exactly sure how it does it, but
That's exciting, yeah.
but
I
it does
work
do
really
it.
hard on my learning objectives.
Good.
But I don't always know how.
Well,
I
someone's
set
going